sham sangye chadan zoge chonama chudani gyamsuchi daki chashegi pesanamgi lola penche sangye dvasho sangye chadan zoge chonama chanchu vadani gyamsuchi dagi chashegi pesanamgi lola penche sangye dvasho.
Tata yang tu tadi ni balik kan le, tata ni. Jadi tu tu kali mana, kalau bawa le ngah pun balik. Moni ni balik tu le cik syak, jual moni ni balik kalau sibu di sibu cik. Tapi sibu cik, cik ni nanti kena le, senda mana kaji lah. Kalau bawa le tu mana nanti kena le, cik nanti kena le. Tak kalau yang orang cik lah, orang syak orang tak sibu di orang cik. Siapa ni tak sibu di orang cik ko. 지당 제례들 국제원들 때는 알아도 콜로 당보세 다 마시샴들 내용 거예요. 콜로 당보나 호랑 콜로 당보 니 콜로 당보를 있으냐 콜로 당보 센시 속으로 와 센시 기어지. 콜니 콜로 니 강한데도 강가로 콜로 바라봐요. 바로 센시 기어지.
맞아.
다 너도 공대에 가와지 그러면 너도 공대에 콜로 탐이 나는데
센시.
니가 콜로 탐이 센시 올리는 거. 다 이제도 니 개자 강가로 얘기 되니 콜로 당보당 이반이지 공시 세계하고 수시계에서는 어디 공대 세계 그래서는 상계 좀 된다로 콜로 당벌을 지나들이 통자 이반 들이 통자 팀이 간도 좋았지 한미가 내지 결혼한 거가 어디 공대에 내용으로 왔어 그래서 다 방송으로 시에서고 어디 공대에 날리는 거리스 다 교환에 발소 시 공시 코에 어디 공대에 직시하고 어디 공대에 다 대장 된게 뭐야 가르쳐 쌤담배 다 개바티 또 캠보다 마소나 로벤 파와 통에 통에 야나 파와 통에 송지는 코탕 지슈고라 케바 로벤 인이라 또 공주 송지여나 대창 타마 거라 정말로 동거 지금 얘기 롱 된다는데 딱 얘기돼 지금 거랑 막 도당도 보고 중고랑 도당도 보고 네 지금 용걸 좀 많죠 깬다다 마소는 두고 막 바탕으로 비슷하냐 이거 근데 이 도저 공대는 시작했지 도저 공대는 가르치기 있잖아 교환해 발로 시와로 시고 TV 공시되는 진짜요. 다 시부지 공시고 쇼 그래서 원님에도 공시고는 다기 순가샤 뭐 미샤 순가샤 다 교환해 발로 시 공시들로 도리 공대 나라 순가 마샤가 재밌지 이샤
So now our task is to go about in the second turning of the wheel to figure out what it was the Buddha really had in mind when he talked about things. According to the mind-only school, what was it that the Buddha really had in mind when he taught those 5 characteristics? We finished the first one, which was the fact that things have no nature of their own, and now we'll be going on to the next 4. In general, when we speak about turnings of the wheel, we're thinking about specific texts that typify that turning of the wheel. So we're talking about the second turning of the wheel or the medium turning of the wheel in terms of those 5 characteristics which typify the contents of the second turning of the wheel. And then there are other works or other subjects which typify, which are classic examples of the wheel. And so we've been through those, we've been talking about those. When you talk about the third turning of the wheel, the job of the third turning of the wheel was, people came up to Lord Buddha and said, what did you mean during the first and the second turnings of the wheel? So if you're going to talk about what is the content or what are the classic examples of subject matter that comes up during the third turning of the wheel, well, that would be discussions just like the one we're having now, which is, finding out what it is the Buddha meant during the second turning of the wheel, and specifically during the latter 4 of the 5 characteristics which are typical of the second turning of the wheel. So we'll be going now into the third of those sections. Lord Buddha here, when he's discussing the latter 4, he will not be covering all three of the groups that he covered when he discussed the first of the five, right? When he discussed the fact that things have no nature, he discussed all three groups of objects. But when he gets to the second part, which is discussing those four characteristics, he's going to be leaving out. He's going to be skipping one of those three groups. And in Jetsun Kapa's presentation, Jetsun Kapa is going to be quoting primarily that sutra called, the sutra in which the Buddha explains his true intent during all the other sutras, which is called Dode Gongjo. And then he's going to go on to quote, as necessary, the great forefather, which is called the great Kembo, right? Like almost the great abbot or the great master of the Mind-Only school, which will be Master of Sangha. And then he'll also be drawing in Master Vasubandhu and other great masters as needed in his presentation. So that's where we're going now. In the next presentation, which is the latter four of the five, right? Which I've already mentioned that he's going to leave out one of the groups. He's not going to treat one of the groups. Don't forget that the first of the four is going to be called looking into the fact that the arisal of things or the beginning of things is not something which happens of its own accord or by definition. So if you had to guess which of the three groups might be left out in this discussion, which one do you think it would be? Huh? Pichik kunda de shamna do. Ragi tani ke dube. Kewa me pa sayani.
Kunda ko tikko mando no ta shaya ko la kazu do. Misha ko la kazu. Tagi de nge chan ni yus la.
Naso. Shaba ni che. Shaba chiche malani. If we talk about a growing of things which does not exist by definition, if I say I'm about to teach you what the Buddha meant when he said things don't grow of their own accord or by definition, then which of the three groups do you think he's going to leave out? Huh? Yongdu bina. We're talking about what could it be, and at this point you can kind of flip around and change your mind if you want. How many does that apply to? Things don't have a nature of growing of their own accord, by definition. But chidang kyewa rangi teni ki duba mayins sedagane de peju shenwangi tonne shegones. So is the shenwang things which are caused, things which are dependent? Is this the category which you think should be left out when we discuss that, or the category that should be left in when we discuss that? That dietenne shegones matopia yomares. Shenwang di yebana. So if you take him by himself, if you treat things which are dependent by themselves, things which grow from other things by themselves, is this the one you'd want to concentrate on when you talk about things not having a nature of growing of their own accord or by definition? So now you're going to ask, with regard to things that grow from other things, can you say that in the Mind-Only school?
No.
That it doesn't have any growing by definition?
By definition, you can't say that.
And if you say of the other two categories, oh, these don't have any nature of beginning of their own accord, or by definition. Is that okay? Can you say that about them? That kosa siyadi kunda kitem shechogres katu. Koran siyadi yongdu kitem shechogres. Niga lo niga kitem shechogres. So can you use it for both kunda and yongdu or not?
No, yongdu doesn't work.
yongdu nakyawa meva. If you're gonna keep lowering the price when you sell this, if you're gonna keep lowering the price when you offer me the money for this thing, you should have told me from the beginning the price. First you said we couldn't use this expression towards us too, and now you're saying maybe we can use it for one of them, and make up your mind. It does use this expression for what do you call constructs and for emptiness, and he does not use this expression. Refer to dependent things with this expression. So, okay, we'll agree with that. Anyway, jokes get better the hotter it gets. I mean, when the weather is hot, then maybe we need more jokes. Sounds, I think he said that. People have more and more faith. I don't know, I didn't get it. Anyway, he's telling more jokes when the weather's hotter and keeps people awake. Okay. Faith increases when the teaching gets funnier. People are more likely to come and leave the food behind. We'll be beginning the quotation from the sutra where the Buddha explains the sutras, what he meant when he spoke the sutra. And then they're going to be going through, first at the top of page 19, he specifies when he says Dhammo Dhammama, he's saying, when I say things don't have a nature of growing of their own accord or by definition, and he's kicking out the middle one, and he's concentrating on the first one and the last one. So he's already agreeing with you on that. And then when he goes down, he starts going down to the four characters. This is from the sutra, right? And first he says, he starts going, let me see. He says things don't start by definition, things don't stop by definition, things have been peace from the beginning, meaning not self-existent from the beginning, and things have been nirvana, or gone beyond, right? We talked about it the other day. And he says each one begins to push the other one. Each one triggers the next one. So he says, because things don't have a natural growing, then they don't have a natural stopping. Because they don't have a natural stopping, they don't have a natural state of peace. Because they don't have a natural state of peace, they don't have a natural state of nirvana. And each one triggers the next one. Now how that is going to go in here. And we're only referring to constructs right now. We're going to start this explanation only referring to constructs. Again, it's a process by which each one of the four acts as a justification for the next one. So each one is triggering the next one. So when we say that kundak, things which are constructs, first of all, they don't have any nature of being existing by definition at all. We've already established that. That was the first one. They don't have any nature of existing by definition. Since they don't have any nature of existing by definition, they cannot have a nature of having grown by definition. Now, whether or not they grow, we're just now you're approaching that question. Since they don't have any nature of existing by definition, they cannot have any nature of having grown by definition. Anything that hasn't grown can't stop. Okay? Nothing that hasn't grown could stop. So, needless to say, if you say this thing doesn't have a nature of having grown by definition, then naturally that leads on to the next one, which is they don't have any nature of having stopped by definition. And these two qualities, not having started by definition, not having stopped by definition, is that some kind of quality that suddenly changed? It used to be different, and now it used to be one way, and now it's another way. Like the growth and stopping of things used to be existing by definition, and nowadays doesn't exist by definition because Lord Buddha decided that now it shouldn't exist by definition or something like that. Is that the way that these two lacks of self-nature are? No, they've been that way forever, ever since the beginning of time. And that's called the Sumina Shiva. They have been, in a sense, peace. Peace meaning the state of not existing by definition, the state of not existing self-existently. They have been that way forever. They've been that way since the beginning of the beginning. That's what the next one means. Sumina Shiva means they have been, in a sense, peace or a lack of self-existence from the beginning, and it's not some kind of new story. Then you take, they are forever gone beyond the state of a self-existent birth, instead of self-existent stopping. They've gone completely beyond the state of being born by some kind of by definition and stopping by definition. So if you take some sort of a threshold and you say this is called grief, okay, this is called grief in a sense, or suffering in a sense. A self-existent starting and a self-existent stopping are called grief. Then all kundak things, all constructs, have forever passed beyond that grief. They've always been beyond that grief. Remember that the Tibetan word for nirvana is to pass beyond grief. That's the last of the four. And so when Lord Buddha says that passing beyond grief doesn't exist by definition either, what he's saying is that with regard to constructs, their stopping and their beginning, which has forever not been existing by definition, they are totally passed beyond that state. They have gone beyond the state of self-existence, and in that sense, they are gone beyond grief, which is the Tibetan word for nirvana.
다티 계제 독수다 꼭꼭 시타마서는 내가 아무 프랑베게 독서 가리 메자 안샤마 시디 메스마 비자게 가리 메가 독서 가리 메메메사.
Now here the Buddha is making denial after denial after denial, saying, this is not true of this, this is not true of this, this is not this, this is not this, this lacks this, this lacks this, this lacks this, this lacks this. What does he lack? What do they lack? What do you think he's talking? Why is he concentrating on lack? Doesn't have. What's the very biggest root, crucial thing that isn't there?
Existence by definition.
Ngoni said, me said, Ngoni said this. Kosena, Ragi said this.
아니 괜히 들어오면 이제 폼에 빠져서 시험하듯이
You're correct. Very clear. Actually, you're both kind of correct, but you're more correct. And the crucial point is, yeah, from the beginning. The batteries may last in the camera for 40 minutes, but it won't keep our monastery there for a minute. So you got the main point. It all goes back to number one. It all goes back to the fact that things don't exist by definition. And because that first thing doesn't exist by definition, then the fact that things grow doesn't exist by definition, and then the fact that they stop doesn't exist by definition, and etc., etc., etc. Each one triggers the next. So we have sort of a logical statement here. We can say, consider constructs, okay? They don't exist by definition because, and can you supply the reason for it?
Since they don't start by definition. No. Yeah, they don't start by definition.
Conoscere codate c'è una cosa che mi dice I didn't translate the literature correctly, okay? He says, consider constructs. They neither grow nor stop. They neither begin nor stop by definition because they don't exist by definition.
내는 전에 슈구쭈구 데라 숨 인간 꿈에서 인간 같아. 장관아마 동가와 집에 대송아 지혜송소서에 도리공 찍지. 군다라 제라미 비규센투 랑기 테니키 만두도 끝이야.
And that's exactly what Jetsun Kappa says, 5 lines from the bottom of page 19, when he says, we have to posit as a reason for the fact that constructs don't neither start nor stop by definition. The reason that we can put forth is that, well, they still exist by definition.
What did you want? How did you do this? How do you want to come for you? You're not get a question. I'm telling you, never you to kill the couple. You don't want to
So if you say that for the reason that they don't exist by definition, they don't start and they don't stop by definition, then you're implying that they start and stop a different way. Well, what way would that be? How do you say that?
어디 싫어서 맞지? 다스는 또 골티 골티.
I shot that money make a door, you know? Don't you remember that?
아니라 우마미 골티 골티 재밌니 와는. 너가 특히 버섯진들 이제 버섯진들 시간을 이제 재밌을 수 있잖아.
Give Michael that extra key to that door that you got.
내가 뛰는 책에서 골티 딱 말이
Seems like you got this extra key to that door and keep playing it on.
대낮고 데려와서 깨쳐볼 시행입니다. 깨워다는 각바 맨데 내가 가르쳐 나는 재미 나중에 제가 알아봤어요. 다 깨워다 각바 유연아 아니 하고.
How about we do it this way? If you say it this way, they have no starting and they have no stopping because they are
I'm changing
because they exist by definition. So if you say it that way, then what happens to the starting and the stopping? They don't exist. They don't exist. There's no starting, there's no stopping because they don't exist by definition. 딱 기와다 가봐 주지.
말 연아 가수가 연아 꼭 연아 꼭 가봐.
If they did exist, like I said, if you do that, you're not.
꼭 란생이 좀 매자 깨워다 가봐 민도 와서 마 영화 나왔어. 코나 깨워다 각바 연아 꼭 가봐 꼭 가서.
Okay. If you say that they don't have, because they don't exist by definition, they don't have starting and stopping. Now, if they did have starting and stopping, then what would happen? Give it a kappa.
연아?
You give it a kappa. The correct thing. You give it a kappa. Rangi tu mumi
대단히 대인한 일이 콜. 그러나 네가 무슨 다 디싱들라 저와다 갖고 여서 납샤나 콜게 야 가게 야 슬람 타고 가리인 슬람을 찍더라면 된지 갈라. 그래. 그때 말하는 된지 뒤삼아 가르고.
If I go around and hold up this stick and say, this stick has its own starting, and this stick has its own stopping, then in effect, what am I implying?
By definition.
You could, 뉴먼들이야 개어유 가바유 세나 남나 근데 된게 비추가 라기체리 비두베 개어유
랑디 좀 유스다 아무나 치면 무슨 나라 그라시 얘기야 이제 디는 그라시
And that's exactly how the Buddha presents it. It looks like the Ali. He says that's exactly the way the Buddha explains it. If it started by, if it did have a nature of growing and stopping. We're following a particular line of reasoning where he said because they aren't that, they can be that, and if they were that, they'd have to be the other way. And in general, what you said is true, but in this particular line of reasoning, we can't. We're not going that way. So don't wander off to those fields out there looking.
지난 얘기다. 센터에 놀러 깨워다 갖고 수나 연아야. 수나 깨워다 갖고 연아 꼬랑이 생이 죽게 짠짠 차 봐. 이렇게 하고.
Generally speaking, in the MindOnly school, any kind of starting, any kind of stopping would have to be such that it was by definition.
나 간제다. 나기 생이 죽이 깨워다 갖고 지면 수나 면아야. 깨워다 갖고 메시 괜히 갖고 왔어.
So the implication here is that if something didn't have a starting, and if something didn't have a stopping, which existed by definition, it wouldn't have a starting and stopping. That's what he's been kind of searching around with.
깨워다 참다 송송 깨워다 갖고 연아 랑기 생이 죽어 이렇게 차 랑기 생이 죽이 깨워다 갖고 차.
So if you put it into a logical statement of necessity, you have to say that if something has a starting and if something has a stopping, then it must, by necessity, have a starting and a stopping which exists by definition.
그럼 아직 그런 뭐 되게 연습을 좋아했다는 소리 가지고 매트지. 뭐라는 게 그래서 랑기 생이 죽이 깨워다 갖고 지금 길을 내비 깨워다 갖고 시에 들어 말이야. 그래서
So when you asked me just before if there could be any other kind of starting or stopping, if it weren't starting and stopping by definition, you're kind of getting your answer here.
Okay. Jordan, can't you stop on anything to Jordan? Anything to Jordan?
It's a necessity both ways. It's a killer both ways. If it is in this school, if something has starting and stopping, it must be a starting and stopping which exists by definition. If something has a starting and stopping which exists by definition, then it can have a starting and stopping. And if it doesn't have a starting and stopping which exists by definition, it can't have a starting and stopping. Now, we keep having these little, vignettes where we have little commentates, where you and I discuss something, and then we always have to go back to the book and say, well, here's where the book says that. So we have to go back to the authority or the basis and say, I'm not just making this up, this is not some little conversation. This is exactly, it happens to be the next part of the book. And if you want to see where that little last vignette came from, it was page 19, 5th line from the bottom, up to the 2nd line from the bottom. And in there, the Buddha says exactly what we just said. Now, if we talk about things, now let's not talk about things that don't exist, okay? Let's just talk about things that do exist. Okay? So, if it had a Kyodan Gapa Yuna, that could come to Shanghai. So, if we posit, if we restrict ourselves to things that exist, and then we further make the requirement that this thing should not have a beginning or a stopping, well, where do we end up then? You are right, and what you just said is correct, because you were thinking in terms of the three groups. But if we don't say in terms of the three groups, if we divide all existing things, I know you guys have studied Dura, elementary logic, and Dagrig, elementary, logical forms. So I know you're going to know the answer to this. If you divide all existing things into two categories, what are the two things? Yeah, where did we end up after we kicked out one of those? And that's exactly what the text says. Page 19, 2nd line from the bottom. By the way, I think I just said Lord Buddha, I think this is Jetsu Compass. And it says, what is that thing? Means, what is that thing which is devoid of starting and stopping? What are those existing things which don't have starting and stopping? Oh, dumache, okay? Unchanging things which have not been caused or created. Where are we going to put constructs? We're going to put them on the cause side or the uncaused side?
They're not changing.
Oh, that's it.
Don't forget we've been talking about these 4 characteristics, right? We finished the one around the last 4. No starting by itself, no stopping by itself, and then peace from the beginning, meaning not something from the beginning. And then the 4th one, remember, was its nature is to be total nirvana, or its nature is to be totally beyond grief. And one meaning of this is that it's totally beyond all negativities, meaning all mentally afflicted things. Okay, so you can interpret the word grief as meaning all mentally afflicted things. All things having to do with mental affliction grief can be described that way. And then having a nature of being beyond grief can be described as having a nature of being beyond those things which are involved with mental affliction. Mental affliction or involved with mental affliction. Now, among the 2 kinds of objects, changing and unchanging, where are you guys going to put all those mental afflicted things? Now, don't forget, you put the constructs in the unchanging stuff, and then you went and put the mental afflicted stuff in the changing stuff. Is there any mental afflicted stuff that has to do with the constructs?
Yeah.
Wait a minute, were constructs staying with those changing stuff and the unchanging stuff?
That's cool.
I don't quite like it if you say, that this changing mental afflicted stuff is going to come live in the house of the unchanging constructs that make up your mind. So anyway, if the face has all unchanging things, and then suddenly it gets something out of whack, and something because the nose is like changing, but the face is unchanging, it's not very cute. Make up your mind. How much of it does the memory affect this guy? Or the constant? I couldn't have that something much anyways. Any? What? Good? Didn't you guys already agree that things having to do with mental affliction are changing? Changing.
We have to do that. We can't hold that.
난 영어적 근답에 처라 영어적이 지금 여버디 죽다디 다 가서 유그레스 방단이 이 켈렌디 쇼레스 나 영어레스 근답이 지금 처 근답이 처라 영어적이 지금 요레스 세야디 켈렌 가서 켈렌 처라 나 교르 지금
제가 다 인지가 답이 간다 보자로 근답은 땅파네 근답은 땅파네 그냥 이 몸을 쥐고 미다 봐네 그냥 몸이 쥐고 근답은 내 근답이 뒤에 다 쉬워 내가 제가 스톤 내가
So you have to say that in a sense, because one is changing and one is unchanging, that constructs living in the unchanging camp, right, are totally free of mentally afflicted things, which are changing things. So in a sense, they are devoid, they are gone beyond, they are a piece of those things. And now he's using those same wording to describe constructs being gone beyond mentally afflicted things, or passed beyond mentally afflicted things, or peace, a state of peace which is free of mentally afflicted things.
다 다시 근답은 뭐야? 근답으로 전에 네게 시비도 매스라 송하스 교환 완전 교환 다 완전 시원한 시. 다 니니니 못이 근답은 매스야. 니니니 못 근답은 매스 있어. 서만이 시시 똑같하게 잡고 시작해. 코 시원. 양해지 방에 시작. 코에 대야스 라버로 근답은 이제서 시규 방에 잡고 걸어 꾸는 몸이 쉬어 시작. 양해 걸어 꾸는 몸이 쉬어 시작. 근답 니니네 주 So
we've been describing how constructs are free of all four guys. Right? We got these four guys, which are birth, which exists by definition, ending, which exists by definition, peace, state of being in peace, state of peace, which exists by definition, and then a state of like gone beyondness, which exists by definition. And the first two were easy. You saw how an arisal, which exists by definition, and a stopping, which exists by definition, could not apply to constructs. But now we have to examine, can these last two apply to constructs? And peace means a state of peace which is free of mentally afflicted things. So it's true, you can say about constructs that they are in a state of peace, meaning that they are free of mentally afflicted things. And you can say of constructs as well that they are in a state of nirvana, meaning they are in a state of having transcended or having gone beyond mentally afflicted things. So in that sense, the latter two guys don't apply to constructs. Does that make sense? Is that okay?
The latter two don't apply to constructs?
Right. When they exist by definition.
Because it doesn't exist by definition.
No.
This is your name. Semene Shiva dan Nyomochok Chugi Lesh Nyomochok Chug Mebe Shiva Nyomochok Chug Digi Yang Negabanes Di Chidandi Ragitini Kitubish Nyomochok Chug Embe Shiva Sigure Nyomochok Chugi Embe Shiva Sigure. He says it's true whether you add by definition or not. It's true of constructs that they are a state of peace which is devoid of mentally afflicted stuff, and it's also true of concepts that they are a state of peace which is devoid of mentally afflicted stuff which exists by definition. They are Kundatezo Nyomochoki Chuki Wembe Shiva Yimba Mahimba Nishirikayo Nishirikayo Gewa Me Kappa Me Shiva Me
Shiva Me 나는 신기용 양해 권해 양해 되네 장군이가 껴왔네 가봐매 나고는 되나 다 때도 파트파트 식님아 보라 시험하네 시스 파트파트 시험하네 시스라고 다시 요즘 양은 예 양해 시험 예 라고도
then it's my fault, I think, in the translation. You have to add the word are not to the first two. They do not have a nature of starting by definition. They do not have a state of nature of stopping by definition. But in the latter two, he's saying they are a state of peace which is devoid of mentally afflicted stuff. And then the fourth one is they are the state where you have gone beyond mentally afflicted stuff. So the second two are, in a way, a positive expression of a negative thing. Okay, they are a state of peace which is devoid of mentally afflicted things, and then they are a state of transcendence, of going beyond mentally afflicted things. So that was, I think it was my mistake in the translation. Is that okay? Any problems there? Everybody okay? Okay. Sorry for the confusion. When you say peace, you mean, and by the way, in Tibetan the word peace also means death or stopping, you see. So when you say peace or stopping, it means a state of not having that thing anymore, a state where that bad thing has stopped. And when you say transcendence or nirvana, in Tibetan the implication is gone beyond or transcended or passed beyond a state where the thing is suffering or grief, which here means mentally afflicted things.
제가 다 얘네만 요즘 달리 가지고 요즘 싸웠던 게 뭐라니 생각도 몇 배치도 꼭 그냥 티크만 그냥 저하고 그냥 좀 강화면 된다 이제 시와다 아니 영향을 내가 마치 치마라서 그냥 치는 기거였어 제 친한 중에 다 단단하게 샤마니 먹거나 다또 방에 끓이는 몽치 시시하네 콜레 수시 콜레 예 나는 강남난 되게
So you can also describe that triggering process, that progression in that way. So because they don't start because their starting has no nature of existing by definition, and their stopping has no nature of existing by definition, and because of that, now you can go this way. They are in a state of peace which is beyond. They are in a state of peace in which you have stopped, right? Joking, Tibetan, she. You are in a state of peace where you have stopped those mentally afflicted things, and then you are in a state where you have gone beyond the grief of the mentally afflicted things. So you can say it that way too. You can describe this progression that way as well.
죄송하다. 아마니 이거. 한 디케체 되는 연기께서 샤마 계시는데 수주기 이랑 타만들. 쇼가 주기 이랑 타만들. 제가 다 자원이 이만 제가 이메 그냥 이모기 취해서 미롱이 치를 했어 많이 쉬워. 아 신지 용수냐는데 엔데 다시 시시였거든 양해세고 소세 양해 딜 그네 이 치로 양해 보다
And so now again I'm going back to the text to give you scriptural authority for the little conversation we just had. Okay, so you go back to page 19, second line from the bottom, and it's here that they identify the peace, for example, and they identify the grief, for example. And here it says peace and a total natural, sort of a natural nirvana, it says here. You can identify those now as being line 2, page 20, as being gunyong, which means all of those things which have to do with mental affliction. So peace meaning an absence or a rest in peace of the mental afflicted things, and then going beyond mentally afflicted things. And here's the actual scriptural backup for that little conversation we just had.
여기서 어디서 한 뒤에 되게 얘기돼. 공식으로 인상이 맞지. 다 군다가 깨져 치사이 맞지. 똑바로는 내내지 않지. 다 용도가 시험한테는 내다. 미니에 보러. 다 용도가 다 용도라. 아니 갈 수만 있으나 말죠. 안지 부교하면 가보면 무슨 시 용도라다.
Before I promised you we go in 2 groups, 2 or 3 groups, right? We left out one of the 3 groups, and we promised that we would go through the remaining 2 groups. We have now completed going through the constructs. You can close the case on the constructs, okay? And now we're moving on to Yongdu, which is emptiness in the MindOnly school, and we have to describe emptiness in terms of the latter 4 of the 5 characteristics that came up during the second term of the yoga. Alright, so here we go.
What? 다인데 용도지 교환면 아니 교환면 받아서 시공시 도대 공대나는 공시하지 도대 공대 찍기 당한 거야. 다 찍고 딱 하는 감각도 없지. 그래서 이제 여사고 돼. 유시 탐내 인생 이바야 공대네. 남자도 공대로 저 단어로 시작와. 이마 송신 마제도 마게 시송대스 받들에 다 디슈대로 장고나만 동방을 치고 뒤태나 송가했어. 다 이비사 또 없이. 다 계속 송하는 거 아니야.
Then first we're going to get the quotation from the sutra, wherein Buddha explains what he meant in the sutras, and then you're going to get the explanation by Tetsun Kappa of what that means. So that's a long story. It goes from line 2 or 3 on page 20 down to the next and last line. And Geshe-la says we don't have to go through that sutra quotation directly word by word. What we'll do is we'll go to Tetsun Kappa's explanation of what that thing means.
Okay. 다 거기 군다는 신이지 빠지 다다 군다는 무슨 신이지 맞. 저기 나한테 되게 좀 믿고 와. 그냥 대체기 막 자자는 거. 이 용도를 그냥 막 좀. 내가 그렇게 뭐 그런 게 좋게 안 돼. 근데 내 용도를 내. 나한테 되게 좀 껴하고 믿고 와. 되네. 지금 좀 마시고 막. 무슨 뭐. 군다는 내 이쁘니. 아니 생이 좀 매파는데 마마마마마 용도가 개 벌써요. 용도가 아니지 그게. 아 용도가 가서는 내 나한테 생이 좀 껴옵니다. 이게 말이야. 나가지 봐. 근데
when we discussed the concepts, because it was already something that description number 1 applied to, right? Description number 1 is what? Existing by definition, right? Not existing by definition, right? Out of the 5, not existing by definition. So we said that there was a progression that was triggered by the first one all through the end of the 5. We said not existing by definition triggers not growing by definition, triggers not stopping by definition, means that it is peace or rest in peace of certain things, and then it was going beyond those things. But now, when you talk about emptiness itself, you don't have to have the first one. You will not have the first one. You can't say of emptiness itself that it is not something which exists by definition. So we go straight to the second one. Okay, it's not a 5-step process. It's a 4-step process. So the place where we step off from, the stepping off place, is not going to be the same. Not stepping off from it doesn't exist by definition. Now we're stepping off from it doesn't have any nature of starting by definition. Is that okay? That'd be some of that. I have to think about that. Oh yeah. Okay. It's what it's according to their system. It's with number 2 that we start to things that don't apply to it. How about you quiet ones? Is this okay?
Can you say again? Can you make this say?
이야기하지 있습니다. 라기스님이 뭐 더버디 연주 이거 땡기 막 고야 주isen 카이노스 더버디 라기스님 뭐 누가디 연주가 시에 막 고야 막 처음에 주isen 연주 라기스님 주변 yes. Everybody knows that of the 3 groups, 2 of them do exist by definition, and only 1 of them doesn't exist by definition. Did you guys? Everybody knows that. We baked this cake yesterday. Are your problems all removed? Okay, we move ahead now. So those 2 of the 3 groups do exist by definition. So you can't use a characterization number 1 with regard to emptiness. That everybody clear on that?
Yes.
The latter 2 characterizations, which is that it has reached a state of peace, wherein the mental afflictions have rest in peace, right? And then the 4th one, which says they have gone beyond or transcended the state of grief. These 2 are easily applicable to emptiness. These 2 are easily applicable to Yondu, okay, to total disability or translate. Why? Because obviously emptiness itself is obviously devoid or a state of peace, which is wherein everything related with mental afflictions has ended or stopped, rest in peace, right? And then the 4th one, obviously, emptiness is something which is passed beyond or gone beyond a state of grief in the sense of grief as something which is mentally afflicted. They don't apply to emptiness.
계속 치마치미 정말
now Jetson Kampf is going back in discussing especially the fact that emptiness itself does not have those qualities of beginning by definition, right? We did these two, right? We didn't do these two yet, and this one doesn't apply. Right? So in discussing whether or not emptiness itself has the quality of starting by definition or ending by definition, right? In discussing that, Jetson Kappa is going back to the original quotation from the sutra in which the Buddha explains himself in his true intent of the sutras, which covers most of page 20, which takes up most of page 20. And in there are some very difficult expressions in Tibetan. When they got translated from Sanskrit into Tibetan, they are difficult, they become difficult expressions. So Jetson Kappa is trying to help you out with some of the difficult expressions in the sutra when he gets onto the subject of why those two don't apply to emptiness itself. And there's an expression called tapa tapa du and tersu tersu du. Tapa in English means unchanging, as you know. Tersu means in English like self-standing, independent, stands on its own, something like that. And these difficult words, which means the time of the unchanging, unchanging, and the time of the self-standing, self-standing. The first one, Jetson Kappa says, refers to all the time that came before. So the time of the unchanging of the unchanging, or the time of the unchanging, unchanging, means all the time that came before us. And the time of the self-standing of the self-standing, or the time of the independence refers to all the time which is to come. So these two expressions are referring to all the time that came before and all the time which is to come.
딱 그래서 따빠 치마치미 뒤라서 딱 요거 따빠 생각만 가르네 치마 가르겠으나 나는 요거 돌아 생각만 똥이랑 진데 알았어 중마가요 그래 요거 그래 똥이랑 진데 그래 그거다 되겠어 주인이랑 내가 인자 같이 있네 다 요거 나만 내 주인이랑 저 똥이랑 진데 중마야 요거 같이 있나야 얘는 똥이랑 진데 내가 이리 가르 말했으나 유지해
What's this got to do with proving that these two characteristics don't apply to emptiness, right? Or to Yondu? I have to ask him for a better translation for Yondu. Okay, Yondu meaning Yondu is 16 euro in the indicating that but the Tony Yondu the Tony is Yondu rangi 16.
다시 예, 꼭 가르치는 요 수축제도 그런 때는 딱 그만 멋지 않아. 그만 멋지 않아. 어째 제연도다 우리 저기 동거를 요 진짜 그런 막아 합작 이네 그 짜장 수유제 아키네 내매기모 줘봐 진짜 너무 줘봐. 그래서 나고 짜장거나 파게 줘봐. 그게 우리 제가 들으실 때 초도로지 들으실 때 개미 한번 간가로 개미 제가 그냥 많이 먹지 금방으로 죽잖아. 아, 피지에는 대매기모 줘봐. 이 미팅이 대매 거다 용수 줘봐. 다시.
I asked him for a literal explanation of Yongdu because I don't want to keep saying emptiness when he keeps saying Yongdu, because now we got to the part where he's saying Yongdu is emptiness, right? And it means total existence, but it just doesn't seem comfortable to me. I think construct is good for Gundam, and things that are dependent is okay for Shemon, but I don't like this saying total existence. So I asked him, is there a literal explanation of why it's called total existence? Why is emptiness? He says, well, let's go back into that Mandvika door, and I'll sneak out something that will help you understand how to translate it into English. The word existence here means, if we talk about a water pitcher, the minute a water pitcher begins to exist, the minute a water pitcher comes into existence, then every single thing to do with the water pitcher, all its parts, everything about the water pitcher, every single tiny piece of the water pitcher is automatically, entirely, totally something that is not self-existent. So, upon the state of existence, all, or the totality of the vase is not self-existent. That's what total existence means. Okay? So how to translate it into English? I say totally there. Totally there. Anyway, we'll say totality. Okay, so something like that. We'll figure out a word. Okay? When I say totality, you know what I'm talking about. Okay, which is emptiness. Okay, so now we go back to the point. He says, where do those two weird expressions come in to explaining why totality doesn't have these two characteristics. It says the first expression is from the beginning of the beginning, right? From forever. And the second expression is for forever, meaning hereafter. So what does that got to do with proving that totality doesn't have these two characteristics? If you start talking about forever either way, then you're already into the category of unchanging things, aren't we? Okay. So the minute you're into the category of unchanging things, you can't say anything about changing things about it. Starting and stopping are words that only apply to changing things. So that's why we can immediately, the reason the sutra is starting to talk about these two characteristics from the beginning and forever after, then the reason is that they are talking about the fact that totality, meaning emptiness, doesn't have any nature of starting or stopping anyway. So you don't have to, go into much detail about it. It's no big deal to explain why they don't have starting and stopping by definition. So obviously those two characterizations don't apply to totality, to emptiness itself.
对，他光这些就要干写了，这些人家写了，超要嘛，超不自由。这些人超不真。
Generally speaking, in dealing with Buddhist terminology, you can use a lama's explanation of the literal meaning of the parts or the components of the word to help you understand how to translate the word. But he says, be very careful about thinking that the literal explanation of the pieces of a word is always a definitive understanding of what the word means, because it's not. There'll be many cases in many expressions where if you try to use the literal components of the word that you end up with is not going to be descriptive of all the things that are called with that word, all the things that are named with that word, so be careful with that kind of thinking. Totality is the state of being empty. Okay? Because totality is the state of emptiness, well then it can never change, it will never change, and we cannot speak of it in terms of growing and stopping. So because it is the state of emptiness, because it's imbued with the state of emptiness, then what we call totality cannot be described in terms of starting or stopping. So those two characterizations of it don't apply to it. And the latter two, to repeat, are easy to understand. I don't have to go into any big story about it. If you take the word peace, or having a state of peace, meaning a state where something has been put to rest, then you can describe emptiness or totality as easily as being something which does not have a state of mental affliction or mentally afflicted things. It is a state of peace where that is absent. And also if you describe it in terms of having gone beyond or having transcended the state of mental affliction, then it's easy to see why emptiness itself has transcended the state of mental affliction. Somebody might raise a question, where did Jetsun-Kappa come up with this interpretation of those two difficult phrases from the beginning and from the forever. Where did he come up with his understanding? How did he identify them correctly as meaning all the time past and all the time to come? Yesterday we mentioned, or a couple days ago, we mentioned a Chinese commentary, by the Chinaman, and he says Jetsun-Kappa is saying that's where I got that interpretation from of the sutra's wording. That's where I have learned that it means this thing. Otherwise, they're very weird words. The time of the unchanging of the unchanging, and the time of the self-standing of the self-standing. And I got my interpretation from that particular commentary.
What? 대체 한 디샴드는 계속 말했어. 가르쳐나 파악하는 기점이죠. 뭔가 끊길 수 있어. 뭔가 끊기는 나는가 이야기돼. 아예마 용두자 저와 라이팅 저와메 봐 가방에 봤으면 저를 그냥 시고 티티 공식보다 샤왕 너무 큰다 순간 샤샤 여기 너네 공에 나와 샤왕 샤왕 마샤가 인자 아니 가지 미친 가지고 근데 나와 순간 샤샤 어디 공에 나와 샤왕 샤 여기 간대
now there comes an objection. Somebody raises a question. He says, Master Asanga wrote a book called Abhidhamma Samachaya. Okay, this is a compendium on higher knowledge. Okay, and then in that text, Master Asanga said that these four qualities, right, not having any starting by definition, not having any stopping by definition, being in a state of total peace from the beginning, and being in a state of transcendence or having gone beyond grief. Okay, he said in that text, this person is raising this issue, says that Master Asanga in that book said that those four attributes apply to all three groups, okay, and not just the two of them. So what's that all about?
What was your honest? I could do none of Sunga Shap, but what could you do with the name? And it's a shoe started. 인생 숨바도 원하는 거지. 근데 장 꾸는다비 뭐니 나 재능 뭐니 몇 바탕 군다. 신기 원하는 나 저 뭐니 몇 바탕 신와. 용수 주발라 저다만 뭐니 몇 신. 마지바 마가바 선만의 시와라 신용도 냐는 데와 시송장. 뭐다? 가지 군다. 뭐 그게 직비 좀 되어지지. 근데 나 손가시 안.
Here's how the question comes up in the quotation from the Abhidhamma Samachaya. In the Abhidhamma Samachaya, then Master Asanga says, it's because the Buddha said that constructs don't have a nature of existing by definition, and because things which are dependent or caused don't have a nature of growing, and because those things which are, because totality doesn't have a nature of being ultimate, it's because of those three, he says, that the Buddha said that things don't have a nature of existing by definition, things don't have a nature of growing, things don't have a nature of stopping, things are total peace from the beginning, and things are the state of transcending grief. So in the Abhidhamma Samachaya, Master Sangha is saying, because this is true of these three groups, that's why the Buddha spoke about those four, the latter four characteristics. So don't they apply to all three?
What is it? I think never says. Hanging on to the polar land, on the land, on the thousand dollars, you couldn't do another from Gasha, but the one thing not shown except the carnage. I am with you on the hanging on the animal young as well. Kunda, Yan Japan on the to get my own ambassador. I'm continuing to be. So, Kunda is writing to go 용도 것이 어디서 겨 라이팅 좀 내야지. 겨면 라이팅 좀 가보면 쓰면 라이팅 그냥 맞지 마. 다 뒤지. 다 시원하고 하니 겨 여자. 겨 여자. 나는 괜히 겨 차. 다 마음이 작아서 나만. 이 선보단 도대 공대나 시원하게 하니 깨보다 가게 여자. 이 공식은 맞아도 공부가 투성 진짜로 내가 투성 시에.
This is a little bit difficult for me. Okay, when we talked about constructs, we talked about how all five trigger each other, right? We talked about with regard to constructs, it's true that they don't have an existence by definition, and then that easily flowed on to each of the other four. When we talked about totality, which means emptiness, right? Then we skipped the first one because it is true of it. It's not true of it that it doesn't exist by definition. And then we went through the other four. Now when you get to Shenwang, or things which are dependent or things which are caused, it's impossible to speak of it in terms of not having a nominal sort of growing and a relatively true sort of growing, an apparent growing and an apparent stopping. You know, nominally in a nominal sense, it does have those things. So it's to point that out that Master Sangha is talking about all three groups, because what he means to say about the second group is that you have to realize that it does have a nominal going. It does have a nominal stopping. So the point of him mentioning it here, the second group, is only to because he wants to talk about it in terms of having a nominally existent going and a nominally existent stopping, and other things applying to it as well. So when he's talking about the second group, he's now talking about, remember how we left out first we did all five regarding to constructs. Then we left out the one that we had to leave out when we talked about emptiness. And now he's saying, Master Sangha is saying, and you can also use these with regard to the second group, but you have to adjust them to now also. You have to change them to nominally going, nominally stopping like that. I think that's the point. That was difficult for me.
我读书的，他希望了教育在，但是就教育搞完没地方，地方，
那里，
是吧？这地方那都是大一点。
那杨家这是生的干的，那，
希望了你媳妇的马送是吧？我的我那个马送，你说是艺术的，然后今天注意教育是让希望了你送，然后今天就刚完面是希望了马送过来，还是公司的马上我看上，希望把它看见。 教完人家，然后进去教完人，然后进去刚上人。以前的上面他多的管理，多的管理。跟这个些个。多的管理。知道。所以嘛，多的管理也给，管理告诉了你那个怎么下，想嘛下，多的管理，根据一下，根据。那是。但下面的多的管理都是想完了，然后进去慢慢的习惯人，然后进入两个人的一马线。 马些不是讲，希望拍就差不多要了，希望那个拍就的，帮人家有这个那个怕注意做不到，而且可能你忙错那个做不完，应该现在这个图上面写的，希望了有让给你什么的说，然后是有两个人给他点了，什么说来看，希望人家差不多要嘛，希望拍就他那个有关系，两年活当那个习惯。 差不多，你那个对过吧，应该想拍这个的，他那个对过吧，应该你想往马送的，是多的光的一个，我送啊，你上的些啥？你这人这个些个？这个是光的一个，对，大部分。
Just what I said before. Okay, let's start again. I told him it wasn't really that clear to me, and I'd like to go over it again. So, just what I said before. Okay. Jetsun Kappa is trying to further elucidate why the Buddha, in the book in the sutra where he explains the Antennamus Sutras, did not say that these five apply to things which are dependent or things which are caused. Okay, and he says, Krishna says, let's leave the Abhidharma Sankara right now. Okay, don't worry about it right now. We'll come back to it. Why is it, Jetsun says, that Buddha didn't choose to describe the second category, which is things that are caused or things that are dependent, in terms of being those four things, right? Why didn't the Buddha do that? Well, first of all, you can't say they don't have a nature of growing by definition. Why? Because they do have a relatively real or a nominally real nature of growing growing, and if they have that, then that growing has to exist by definition. And that growing isn't growing by definition in this school. Okay? And if they have a stopping, which is a relatively true stopping, then you'd have to say that they do have a stopping which exists by definition. So you couldn't say about them that they don't have a stopping which exists by definition, or that their stopping doesn't exist by definition. You couldn't say that, because their stopping does exist by definition in this school. That's why the Buddha didn't apply the first two characterizations to things which things which depend on the causes and conditions. Now what about the latter two? Right? One is a state of peace, which is devoid of mentally afflicted things. One is a state of transcendence, of going beyond things which have to do with mentally afflicted things. And here, Geshe-la says, if you think about it, most of the things which are changing, most of the things about our current world around us, which are caused, can be described as things that eventually will have to eliminate within our being. Like the world that you see around you, most of the parts of you, although not all, and I admit not all, okay? If I say not all, but I can say that most of the changing things in your experience, the place you live, you yourself, the different parts of your body and mind, are all things that eventually you will have to eliminate and give up and move to a pure version, right? So in that sense, those things cause things, or at least the great majority of cause things in our experience, are not such that they are peace in the sense of being devoid of mentally inflicted stuff, and they are not such that they are transcendence in the sense of having gone beyond mentally inflicted stuff. So Buddha couldn't use any one of those four characterizations when he spoke about changing things, the second category. Now I think he's going to go on to the Abdam Samchaya, which I screwed up before.
네, 딱히 깨졌지. 정말로 통화하시면 가만히 보고 있으면 내는 죽은 주사시고, 죽은 주사시고 지금 죽체, 딱 지금 주시. 내는 지금 국가대 쪽이 시기 국가 나왔던 이거야. 원래 대단한 시기가 왔던 시기까지. 원래 상황 교화 수기 공실 마순반이 딱을 내고라 엔진 되어를 주니 매pa 민배 민수니 예다 민가 때미치니까 내가 두선 시에 원래 예랑티 교험에 가서 바빠면 마순만 나도 삼시 예 아시면 되나 양해를 대하다 수많은 시간을 하시는 이 개체의 거도 분명히 소배시험 공부하면 시험 빠지 꾸니 다 되는 충분히 휴단이 장도 휴단이 얘기면 인생이가 돼 인생이가 되라 시험하는 공부하면 나지 시험 폐진 유니기 그냥 본 fik치만이 실을 쓰기가 공실을 쓰기가 맞제 빨리 어디 공부하고 정도 나와서 아 fik치만이 있을 때 가르쳐는 되나 여기 좀 가봐도 가보니지 아니 나가서 많이 시원해 안 시원하냐 이 공실을 마셔가지고 대면 취해 대신 그 fik치만이 되나 왔어.
Now if you want the scriptural authority to back up what I just said about why those four characteristics are not applied, actually the way they stated in Tibetan is that they were not what the Buddha was talking about when he spoke about those four. Okay, the way they said in Tibetan is changing things are not what the Buddha was talking. The reason why they are not what the Buddha was talking about when he said those four things is that what I just said, that those four reasons I just gave you. And if you want to find a scriptural authority for that, we're starting down in the end of page 21, going up to the page, beginning of page 22. And what it says here is, especially, what is that? 5 lines up from the bottom, 21, where it says dole. At this point, they're saying, why wasn't it changing things that the Buddha was talking about when the Buddha talked about those four characterizations, right? And then he answers himself and he says, well, first of all, with regard to the first two, which is they don't start by definition and they don't stop by definition, it's a double negative here. The reason the Buddha didn't characterize changing things that way is that they are not something which is not dependently arising. That's why he didn't use those first two terms about it. Why? Because they are not something which is not dependently arising. Meaning, they are something which is dependently arising. That's why the Buddha couldn't say about them that they don't have a starting and stopping which exists by definition. Because in this school, their starting and stopping does exist by definition. Okay? And then with the latter two, it's exactly what I just told you. Page 22, second line, where the Buddha says, Pelcher, Shenwan Pelcher. Pelcher means the vast majority, which is a Maingak, right? Implying that there are things which change, for which the latter two descriptions would be accurate, and would be acceptable. But because the vast majority of them, Pelcher, are involved or are included into the group of things that we call mental afflictions, or the results of mental affliction, or the cause of mental affliction. We call all these together. That's why I've been saying mentally afflicted things and not mental afflictions. It's a very important distinction. So they belong to the mentally afflicted side of stuff. Okay, and that's why, because most changing things in our experience belong to the mentally afflicted side of stuff, the Buddha they were not what the Buddha was thinking of, they were not what the Buddha had in mind when he said those last two things. Oh, things are at peace from the beginning. Things are in a state of rest from the beginning. Or things have transcended greed, meaning mental afflicted stuff from the beginning. Okay, and that's why those four were not. That's why the Buddha didn't have changing things in mind when he spoke about those four. I hope he gets back to the academic sometime. Kundu is waiting to grab you. Oh, waiting in ambush. Abhidhamma Samachaya is waiting in ambush. He says, be careful later when you translate all the stuff in English. You're going to get to this part where it talks about Sikchima and Sikchima. Sikchima literally means the latter two words, meaning the latter two expressions, meaning the latter two of the four. So he says, don't forget it. You know, when you get to this later and you're translating in English and you run into this little expression that says the latter two words, it means the latter two characterizations, meaning in a state of total peace from the beginning and totally beyond the grief. I think you better put a little star next to that expression that says the vast majority of caused things are involved with mentally affected stuff. Because I think you might be having some questions arising in your mind right now about that statement. Did you put your stars? What did Master Sangha mean in the Abhidhamma Samachaya in the Compendium of Higher Knowledge when he said those four characterizations apply to all three of the groups? And what did he have in mind when he said that? Well, I take you back to the other day when we were talking about how these three groups didn't have any nature. You know, one didn't have any nature of such and such, another didn't have any nature of such and such, another didn't have any nature of such and such. Let's go back to that. Let's grab those ideas, those concepts that we had the other day, and shove them into the future and bring them here, and let's try to use them here. Do you think there's any application? Got any ideas about any application to the present question? Let's go, France.
We just have to see which one applies to which. Just like, well, we're talking about Nima applying distinctly according to which cities you're talking about, right? So it may be the same thing. You apply four and see which ones they apply to, and you find out that one of them doesn't get any at all. But that's the way
I didn't catch you.
Oh boy.
He's saying
Okay.
with the four orders,
one
one will apply to,
Some of them will apply to some of them.
some of them apply to
You mean some of the four characterizations do apply to some of the three groups and some don't apply? No, but he's trying to show
I don't know.
why was it that Master Sangha seemed to be saying these four characterizations do apply to all three groups? And what is it about the other day when we talked about the three groups relating correspondingly to three kinds of a lack of natures, right? Lack of nature having the characteristic, lack of nature having any nature of knowing, lack of nature having any ultimate, right? What are those two? Do those three have any applications? This question of why did Master Sangha say that those four characterizations apply to all three?
Maybe if we're reaching that culture one, and we pull out the pure patterns, the practice.
캐치하세요, 괜찮아요.
아니 그냥 하나만 계속 하나만 계속 뒤가 있ます. 이 약간 제가 란기 되게 막 콜라보라는 란기 막 수사할 때 어떻게 보니까 공식 같은 샤워도 되지. 제구나. 제요. 딱 그렇지. 왜 근데 수업을 하고 말이야. 나 어서 이 단계를 이 샤워가 란기 공부에 세야 그상 가는 시에요.
Don't you remember this morning when I asked you about the expression existing by definition and not existing by definition? And I asked you how many of the three groups did this apply to and how many of the three groups did it not apply to? And then you guys went into this long explanation. Some people said two, and some people said three. You said most people agreed in the end that you could say of only one of the groups, right? That it didn't exist by definition, right? And then you agreed that you had to say of the other two groups that it exist by definition. But then some of you were flirting with the idea that some of them, that all three perhaps didn't exist by definition. Do you remember? And do you remember why you thought that? And anything to say about, could that apply to what we're talking about?
Because the Buddha said that things don't exist by nature, that have qualities that start and that have ultimate nature, and those three things correspond directly to the three attributes of the MindOnly school. So if the Buddha said that those don't have any nature, then did he mean, then it could be said that they don't exist by definition.
Okay. Shewanliya, kasa Kundalia, Chiniki Modi, yes, Shewana, Kiwa Modi, yes, Yongdulia, Tunda Modi, yes, Cheres, then really, Modi Messiah, Siki Yores, and Modi Messiah, Siki, Akitini Matuba, Jore, Jova Yina, putting Akitini Matuba, Shewana, Beckness.
가는 시황아 콜로파레바도 란티고 메스 시황아 깨디자 여기 가 다이라 되네 그 코랑 공식숨을 위해서 뭐라는 거 숨주가 보는 거예요. 깨디자 시황아 콜로파발레 란티 마트 중에 시황아 빠지다 시황 마트가 있으니 내가 레슨을 하고 데이터 시야봐 괜찮지 시황 그다음에
So let's forget constructs and let's forget totality meaning emptiness, right? Let's concentrate on things that are dependent. And I understand your point, it's well taken. Perhaps the fact that the wording not having a nature might refer to, in general, not having a nature of existing by definition, and that might apply, it seems to be applied correspondingly to all three of them. So in that case, it seems to apply to things which are caused. And in the middle turning of the wheel, in the second turning of the wheel, it is true that the Buddha was talking about things not existing by definition. I lost the rest. Anyway, so let's just talk about things that come from causes. Let's just decide whether or not they can be in any way characterized as not existing by definition. How do you think we can do that? In what sense could that apply to them?
I'll give
you a clue. Okay. Try to make it easier. How is it that the expression doesn't have a nature of growing, right? How is it that applies to things that are causes?
They don't have without the causes. They come separately from the
Kielongoni meba seki tunda de dikaresena Yudan kenai makeba mayis. Different way. Is that just her idea or anybody else having ideas?
What did she say?
She said, remember that the meaning originally, back in the old days, right, of characterizing cause things as not having a nature of growing meant not having a nature of growing without the causes and conditions, right? So she said, does that have any application here? Does that help you?
Also, that's one, and then the other one is they don't go from the causes that you think are the causes.
When you understand it, kewa ngoni meba dilia nagani yores. Kewa ngoni meba said, tunda chikti, rangi kene ke makeba mayin, chikti randa dani chikti. Yeah, I got that. I just brought up that second point because I knew Los Angeles would sooner or later start teaching you that black book, which is a monastic textbook on this subject, because it concentrates so much on that point. For right now, you can pack it up and just leave it away. Leave it aside. It's not a Bible course. It's just a scripture. He's saying that Christy was on the right track. Christy's point was that when they talked about things having causes, depending on their causes, as not having a nature of starting, they meant not having a nature of starting without depending on their causes and conditions. So if you interpret from the mind-only school point of view the wording of Lord Buddha in the second turning of the wheel, when he said things don't have a nature of existing by definition, if you interpret those words with regard to things that depend, growing things, right, as meaning they don't have a nature of growing without depending on their causes and conditions. So that's how you take what it means when the Buddha said things don't exist by definition, when he referred to changing things in the second turning of the wheel. Well, then, this quotation in the Compendium of Higher Knowledge by Master Sangha begins to make sense. Because then you can say, of those categories of things which are changing or depending on their causes, that they don't have a nature of starting by definition, and they don't have a nature of stopping by definition, and they are in a state of total peace from the beginning, and they are transcended from that thing, because in that case, the word existing by definition now doesn't mean what it usually means in the mind-only school. It rather means they don't have a nature of existing by definition in the sense, they don't have a nature of having come about without depending on causes and conditions. He wants to know if Anila got all that I just said.
No, never.
Several rounds.
I thought that the definition is different.
Yeah, that what the Buddha meant is system is by definition.
But it's different.
When you're talking about changing things,
Yeah.
it has a totally different meaning now.
Yeah.
It means they don't not have a name cause and that Shenwangi Wangi Chene, Holo Paba Nawaya, Sagi Chamideki, that's what I'm telling you, Magiba Reyes, Sadi, Monitane, the Chick, Gideshavina, Ragi Gigan, La Kepa, Mayansi, today, Shenwangia, I'm telling you to get your Kapa, the Sumanishi, the Yosin, they said, Chogres, yeah.
다 간지 돼. 땡에도 땡어도 다 어때? 누가나 누가야로. 누가나 스페셜나. 남바지 제단이. 제가 가서 손 미기도 남주를 때 남주를 알아. 남주를 알아. 아, 아빠 칼이 깨져라 뭐 남주를 때. 제 발전 칼 하고 있어요. 양이가 이제 남주데 아우 딱 하고 있어 말이에요. 아니라고 하고 맨 나가.
I can't read Anila's mind, but there is this thing in Vinaya that says about, you've had a communicating form which communicates the intent or the state of mind of the person who's doing it. So in Vinaya they talk about, outer appearance, which indicates the state of mind of the person who has it. And I was just checking her communicating form there, and I noticed that it seemed to communicate some, that she didn't get 100% of what I said about that, or the way Muslim translated it. So I just wanted to check and make sure. I think Roy got it though. If he looks at his communicating part. Did you get it? So he says, if you clarify the reasoning with regard to each one of those four characteristics, if you clarify each one carefully, you say, well, this is what this one means in this case, this is what this one means in this case, this is what this one means in this case. With each of the three groups, then you see how they can apply it.
Okay, 딱 근데 뭐가 근데가 아까 보면 뭐가 근데가 상황가 딜라초고 딜라초고 쓰야고 그다음에 강한 마트를 껴갖고 맨가 그 딘제랑이 팀이 죽었습니다. 딘제랑이 팀이 죽었어요. 아마도 딘제 나서 저랑 뭐에 딘제랑이 팀이 깜빡하면 딘제 수만이 쉬워. 딘제 양양에 되는 거야. 이 근데가 조상시에 상황상에 조상되는
So Jetsun Kabe is saying, when Master Asanga, in his compendium on higher knowledge, said that those four characterizations do apply to things which are caused, what he really had in mind was, they don't have a nature of growing by definition. When you take the words by definition to mean, they don't have a nature of growing without the causes. Okay? And when you say they don't have a nature of stopping by definition, what you mean is they don't have a nature of, in this case, only with shenwa, only with things that are dependent on their cause, that they don't stop through any nature which is not dependent on causes and conditions. Okay? And then the other two are easy too. So all four, Master Asanga, what he has in mind really is a reinterpretation for cause things of what it means to exist by definition, and then it all clears up. Then all four, then changing things could have been what the Buddha had in mind when he spoke those four things also. Are we okay on that, guy? Okay.
Could you say another way to say, by their definition alone, to rule out their causes? Say they don't grow by their definition alone, in the sense that they don't, just in and of themselves, they need something else. Is that what it is?
Rangi tsini ki dupe kiawa mes, and got shawangi from tsini. Rangi tsini ki dupe kiawa mes, and got the cancer in it. Kap dela, tutu ki kap dela, rangi tsini ki dupe. Kiawa mes, and rangi tsini ki dupe sayadi, rangi begin and kiawa mes. Today is from Chomres. Yine chitan rangi tsini ki dupe kiawa sayadi gamya, rangi kiawa sayadi chines. That rangi kiawa sayadi, rangi yuda kenda ni kiawa sayadi, dosi chena.
rangi se sa karsa rangi se rangi teni su kyo mo shang yokere
That's okay, but you got to be careful because in general, the expression they have a way of growing which exists by definition is something they do accept in general with regard to changing things. So if you adjust that wording to say they have a nature of growing by themselves, they might actually accept that if they thought that you meant by definition. If they thought that you meant by those words by definition, because they don't deny that with things that change. So that's why we don't run that circle. Listen. Not even. It's a good thought that you had, it's a valid thought that you had, and I think you were trying to sneak off people When you came up with that thing that by definition could mean by themselves, you were trying to sneak off into that market. So if on one hand you say that the original sutra only applied those four characterizations to two groups, and then you get to Abhidharma Suchaya and Master Sangha has applied it to all three groups. If you don't go ahead and reinterpret what existing by definition means in one case as being distinct from the meaning of existing by definition in the other case, then you have a hassle. Then you have a problem. Case is closed. Let's go on. So we've been talking about these three lacks of a nature. We started out talking about how constructs don't have a nature, and we talked about how causes don't have a nature, and then we got into talking about emptiness doesn't have a nature, certain natures, and then we were describing how this applied to them or this didn't apply to them and all that. But you know, you didn't really describe what is a kunda, what is a construct. You know, what does it mean when you say dependent on others? You know, what does it mean when you say totality? You know, what are those three groups? We didn't really get to that. So here, finally, after the fact, he says, we're going to get a section in which Jetsakapa goes into identifying what those three groups are for us. Because even though you and I have been talking about these three groups and sort of come to an identification of them through our conversation, if you think about it in the text so far, he hasn't really formally gone into an explanation of what those three groups are. So here we start off, page 22, about 7 lines down from the top, and we're going to identify what those three groups or attributes, they're called attributes, right? What those three attributes are. In identifying those three groups and what they are and what it means to be in one of those three groups, the biggest hassle, the worst hassle is the construct. I mean, what does it mean to be a construct? And that's a real hassle. Things that depend on other things, you know, things that go from other things. We are wearing them, we are eating them, we are sitting on them. That doesn't take genius to describe those. If you can describe musul tuna, yabu musul tuna, any tuna if you tackle the problem first of what are constructs, then it gives you a big head start on understanding what the third group is, meaning totality, meaning emptiness. So if you tackle the difficult one first, then you have in Tibetan they say a place to chew on. You have a good starting off point. Then you can tackle the subject of what is the emptiness. So it's a lot easier to tackle number 3 once you've tackled number 1. I'm just again laying out for you the road that we're going to travel down tomorrow morning. 근데 로규도 차비하러 차비한테 내가 채워진 건데 아니 그거 다산이 유튜브에 있어요. 아니 Yeah, now you're doing it. You're just like
얘도 가서 닭이네. 저나도 따로 그랬더라. 닭이네.
do you remember I told you about the star somewhere?
락샤네요.
I think I'd better go back to that star and use the touch.
닭이 따라서 그렇지. 얘를 꼭 따.
Didn't I just tell you to stick a star on something?
Yeah.
What was
Yeah.
that?
Yes, majority of
아, 저랑 상대로 왔어. 시원하게 저한테 그냥 이모 쓸 수도 있어. 시원하네. 얘도 산게 이상하게 굉장히 시원하고. 제가 티니콜라 많은 가렸다는 거예요. 시원콜라 그냥 이모 처음에 인기 시원하다. 이모 시원하다 많이 수요하고. 저랑 상대로 왔어요.
It might pop into your mind, you might, I actually popped into my mind, I don't know about you, but when he got to the point and said the vast majority of caused things are tied up with mental affliction or mental afflicted things, then I started to think, and he says you might start to think, all those beautiful things in Buddha paradises, all those beautiful parts of the Buddha that are changing, and so if you get into statistics, well, which one outnumbers the other, are the changing things that are fantastic or Buddha-ish, are they more numerous, or are the changing things which are samsaric or mentally afflicted more numerous? So let's get into a head count. Who's going to come out ahead? What do you think? Can we say vast majority?
Probably
Here comes the left hand. 나중에 수천했어요. 산계게 전에 도스 때나 깔는데 도대체 탐지하게 좀 많이 먹지네. 나가서 집대방 와서 코로나 내년이 도스 때나 남 해치웠어요.
뭐다 저한테 캔서 개팀 사람들 캔서 뭐지 내가 맞지야.
He says it's very helpful to think that way. That's a very true statement, and it has great benefit for you to remind yourself of the truth of that. And so I'll allow you to stick your head into that door, but please don't go all the way in there.
딱 하늘에서나 한다지 나도 시험 패치를 해야지. 정보는 통과가 지금 공화를 많이 따왔대는 몇 당시 와서 따왔대는 몇 당 거라 반대로 가면 지금 산지에 살아가고 남도야 주탈게 남도야 주탈 산지에 살때 내가 내가 나랑 꼭 갖고 와요. 산이나 통과 또 남도 마시기 내가 제일 많아. 남도 마시기 내가 시거랑 시행이야. 대신 어디다 뒤나라 이거 시험 좀 아, 그녀는 파샤고 그녀 뭐죠? 파샤고 이 제압에 맞도 시험하라. 내가 그녀 뭐죠? 이게 시험보다 많이 시험하는 거 많이 가래. 그래서 대신
when Jetson Kappa uses the wording vast majority, what he really has in mind is, listen, because we're studying, by definition, the very fact that we're sitting here studying these things means that we are in the condition of people who have not reached there yet. We are not people sitting in a Buddha paradise, thinking about these things, and our normal experience is from the point of view of somebody who has not yet made great progress along the path. So it's what we call the original condition. There's a word in Tibetan called the original condition, or the initial condition of samsara, meaning we are in the state of what we call the initial condition. The vast majority of what we experience, the vast majority of things around us, the vast majority of the person who has not yet entered the path and made great progress along the path, those things are either mental afflictions or tied up with mental afflictions. And it's not the point, Jessica is not trying to say that statistically, on the whole, that there are more samsaric things than enlightened things. That's not the case, and that's not what the word vast majority means here. Vast majority means here that in the original condition of our world, of our lives, the vast majority of things are either mental afflictions or tied up with mental afflictions.
대화를 또 뭐지 보나 되지. 네가 하고 이게 콜라 삽사 지하 보나 그냥 하고 좀 야채 진짜 리빠 디킨 리페키 포킹비키 근데 내가 나도 모르겠다. 저거는 또 뭐지.
This is Jetson Kappa's style, and you can apply the style to other situations. You know, if you understand what's going on with this word vast majority, then you'll understand what's going on whenever he does that kind of thing, because this is his style. He's talking about it from this point of view. By the way, I forgot to translate one thing. He said, also, not only are those things yet to be reached for us, but they are also beyond our capacity of understanding or imagining even. So when he says vast majority, he's also saying that the vast majority of what you can even grasp or imagine, the things that you can imagine, most of them are mental afflictions or have to do with mental afflictions. We are incapable at the initial level of even imagining those things in the Buddha realm. So we can say vast majority in that case, in that sense.